which I hope people would do. Send us that text, send us that tweet. What's your thought for the day, Rachel?
No eating in the studio is what I've got from
Well, no, we're cool with eating and drinking in the studio.
I'll have a bacon sandwich, please.
Did someone's going to cook it?
I want to talk about pensions because it's been in the news. This big review, Liz Kendall looking into it, the triple lock possibly being unsustainable, the pension system being unsustainable, the report from, I think it's the IFS saying that the retirement age is going to have to be raised till 74. And it's the second time today that I've been talking about this, and I said some stuff the first time, and I have been fielding furious comments from people all day. So I'm going to try and clarify my remarks here, or really just to try and put a bit of context in this conversation, because I think it's a conversation that we need to have as a society. I want to start off by saying that pensioner poverty is very real, and that people who are over the retirement age and are not working don't have the means to supplement their income by just going out to get another job. And many of them do not have great housing wealth and do not have assets, and that is a fact, and that is a fact that any government looking to resolve this is going to have to confront. They're also going to have to confront the fact, however, that many of them do, and that the pension system as it currently is not a case of people during the state pension receiving the money that they paid into a system. There's not a sort of designated pot that is sort of saved for you and your retirement. Today's pension is paid for the pensions of the generation before them, and they were less generous than the pensions that today's generation are getting because of the fact that we're all living longer, and also the fact that the triple lock means that the state pension has increased. So all of this is a good thing, but what it means is that today's workers are paying more generous pensions to more pensioners for longer, and the system as it stands is not sustainable. Yeah. And we have to be able to have a conversation about this. We have to be able to look at the housing wealth that is held by the over 65s, particularly with conversations about social care and benefits like the winter fuel allowance that were universal. We have to be able to have a conversation about what it means for a shrinking pool of workers to be supporting a growing pool of those who are dependent on state welfare, and pensions are state welfare. And we have to be able to do all of that without people going, I paid in all my life, therefore I'm entitled to X, Y, Z, because that mathematically isn't what happened. And if every time anyone tries to raise it, as I did earlier today, they get a barrage of you hate pensioners and you want them to freeze to death, and all the rest of it, and today's workers just don't know how lucky they are, etc., etc., etc. We're never going to be able to even begin to have the conversation that we need to put our retirement system on a stable footing. So there you go. That's a controversial start from me. I'm waiting for the hate mail to come in.
No, a controversy is fine. It is what we do. And conversation is actually all we can do in this studio. We have no other power. And I assume that you are not going to be deterred from having this conversation by the sort of barrage coming in. I assume moving online. Well,
I'm not, but I think politicians are. And I think, if you talk to MPs of all parties and you talk to them kind of not in public, privately, they will say, yes, the present system is unsustainable. Yes, there is something in this sort of intergenerational social covenant that is broken. Yes, the triple lock, which was brought in 2010 with a very clear aim of raising the state pension in instalments to address pensioner poverty, has now reached a point where that is no longer necessary, which is a good thing. We can get rid of that. They'll say all of that privately, and then in public they'll point fingers at the other parties and go, you want to get rid of the triple lock, no, you want to get rid of it, you want to means test it, and I think there is a real dishonesty there from both the Conservatives and Labour. Ironically, Reform are currently, Nigel Farage is saying that you have to look at the triple lock, so maybe he's being slightly more honest on this front. And I think that dishonesty is because of the public reaction whenever anyone says what I've just been saying today.
Yes. Sam, the triple lock. How sacred is the triple lock?
Absolutely. And in fact, today we have been having discussions in the newsroom. I just want to make it very clear that the Daily Express remains absolutely committed to campaigning to keep the triple lock. There's no way we're going to shift on that, because it is a top 3 issue for our readers.
Yeah. The Democrats is not in any way in any shape or form disrespectful, but the demographic of the Express is a demographic you would expect to support the triple lock.
Absolutely, but I think there's where do I even start? Okay, there is no pot, as Rachel rightly says, but people have been paying in all their life. They didn't pay in to just some amorphous mass. They believed they were paying into a pot to support them when they retire. And I think actually, if you look at the state contributions to public sector pensions, which are astonishing, perhaps we can get into that later, they are astonishing. Gold-plated pensions for council workers, for NHS staff. There is no pot for them either, but we're just paying in these enormous amounts for them, and that doesn't seem to bother that many people. People who are criticising the triple lock, it doesn't bother them in the same way. And I think actually when you look at it, pensioners, okay, we have this kind of trope that pensioners are just all really living the life of luxury. But actually, if you look at the stats, only 1 million of the 12 million are higher rate taxpayers, and that's because they've been dragged in by the fiscal drag. They've been dragged into paying higher rate income tax. Actually, about a quarter really are in dire straits, and the rest are slightly over that breadline, or people who've actually worked really hard all their life, done the right thing. What is the incentive to do the right thing if you're going to take things off people who've worked really hard all their lives, paid into the system, and then all of a sudden you say, "Oh, I'm sorry, we've changed our mind on this." And then also you've got to remember why this was introduced, because Gordon Brown, he presided over a 75p a week increase for pensioners. It was just insulting. They were the poorest in Europe, or among the poorest in Europe, and we're still not they are still very, very low in terms of when you look at their counterparts across the rest of Europe. So I just think, I get there is a debate to be had, but when it comes to intergenerational fairness, I don't think the answer is taking money off old people to give to young people. We should be finding ways to help younger people earn better living wages than actually just taking money off old people.
Rachel, do take on that argument, and let me just say before you do, if you want to tell me your thoughts on this important debate, do send me a text, send me a tweet. If you want to offer your own frank thoughts, absolutely do that. If you want to abuse Rachel for what she said, please don't do that. But Rachel, just how do you answer that point?
So I would answer that by saying, firstly, I started off what I said by acknowledging that pensioner poverty was very real, and that not all pensioners had that money and those assets, and the response, which is not quite what Sam said, but is a response that I've heard, which is, oh, so you think all pensioners are fine? No, I don't think all pensioners are fine. I think some are fine, and I think that a higher proportion of pensioners are doing well financially compared to other age demographics. So the poverty rate among pensioners is lower than the poverty rate among working people, is substantially lower than the poverty rate among children. And yet we have a very different conversation when it comes to benefits to tackle child poverty or working age poverty than we do about pensioner poverty. And I think we should be honest about that. I think we also do need to be honest that the "they worked hard and paid in all their life" argument is correct, but we also need the subsequent bit of information, which is the amount that they paid in was substantially lower than the amount that they are expected to take out from the welfare state, because we are living longer. That's not their fault. That is a failure of government policy to think ahead and look at the demographic time bomb that we're facing. But it is reality that people who are expecting the state pension at the age of 66 and expected to live for 20 years beyond that, which is a good thing, are therefore expecting a level of expenditure in state welfare that they did not pay in. The amount that they paid in does not equal the amount that they're expecting to take out. And again, that's not their fault, but it needs to be part of the conversation that the paying in, getting out argument, the two sides of the ledger just don't add up.
I think I completely agree on that, because obviously when this system was set up, with the creation of the welfare state, the life expectancy was far, far shorter. People did not have long retirements. And so I think there definitely is a conversation about that. And I think that's clearly where the government is going. And just on the kind of, the thing with when you're retired is you cannot find any extra income. Your income is fixed. Your income is then fixed. And it's not as though you can go off and think, right, I need a bit of extra cash this month. I'm going to go out and find some work. And that's always the argument, isn't it, about why you have to protect the incomes of older people, because once they've retired, they're on a fixed income for the rest of their lives. And when you are a working age adult, you have the ability to change your circumstances, whether, that I'm not saying that's easy, it really isn't, but that there are ways of changing your circumstances that are not available to older people.
Okay, some of your thoughts listening to this. This is in from Deborah. It says, I've worked hard all my life, sometimes in really challenging times as a single mum. Excited about getting my full pension. We're also quick to criticise. I feel well, I'm glad to live in a country with a working welfare state. It's a difficult topic, isn't it, Sam?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, I think we've come to a point where we're pitting pensioners against working age people, and I think that's a really unfortunate place to be. Let's not bring down the living standards of people who have worked really hard. And let's not forget, actually, a lot of the people who are now retired worked really hard in physical manual jobs in a way that actually younger people do not ever have to do.
And there's a question of justice. There's also a question of affordability.
Yeah.
I mean, you can look at France, which has had and it does have a state pension system, which is, from many objective analysis, hard to afford. It's unaffordable, and you can't ignore that side of the question as well as what you say is the case for justice. And if you make the point that you do, is it not also maybe incumbent on you to talk about affordability? And you're the Express, which takes this position, and you reflect it accurately, is a paper that believes in low tax.
We believe in spending tax properly, and I think that's the difference, John. And I think when you look at some of the ways money is being spent now, I'm not sure our readers think that is a wise use of public money.
All right, I'm going to ask you now, Sam, for your thought for the day.
So this is terrible, but I'm actually stealing a thought of the day from George Orwell. All animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. And that came to mind when I was reading the coverage of Len McCluskey and the Unite Union and what's been going on there over the years. So Sharon Graham, the new Unite boss, has released a report today, an investigation into what's been happening. They Unite famously built a hotel and conference centre that I think was originally supposed to cost about £9 million, but is now well past the 100 million mark. The Serious Fraud Office has been involved. There's been an internal investigation. She said she was really shocked by what she's found. Len McCluskey, the former boss of Unite, has been taking private jets and going to football matches around Europe, actually also in Kyiv, at the expense of the company who was building this hotel. The company got the hotel without a proper bidding process. Objections were raised but were overruled. The cost of this hotel and conference centre is only around 38 million in terms of market value now, but it's obviously cost the union far more than that. But the report found that actually he hadn't broken any rules on hospitality, and the reason he hadn't broken any rules was because they had no rules. There were no rules to break on hospitality. So it's absolutely stinks, to be honest. And Sharon Graham clearly thinks it stinks, and she has hinted as such, but she's obviously restricted by what she can say because there is an ongoing wider investigation at the moment.
Right, another big story out there too, Sam. Thank you. I just want to mention this, if I can, just briefly. It's a bit of advice to catch Times Radio's latest signing this week. It's Stephen Sackur, who's presenting the Times at 1 this week. He's the former presenter of Hard Talk and one of the best and toughest interviewers in the business. Do not miss Stephen Sackur on the Times at 1. It is now 6:17. I'm John Pienaar on Times Radio. Pienaar and Friends with Barclays Business Banking. Grow your business. Bank on Barclays.
Carol Walker on Business banking. Grow your business. Bank on Barclays.
I'm John Pienaar. Here with me on Pienaar Friends, Sam Lister from The Express and Rachel Cunliffe from The New Statesman. So look, our lead story earlier on, when we started off with the programme, it was about the British Medical Association, the resident doctors' strike, which is going ahead as it was scheduled on Friday. There have been various efforts, ideas in the wind to find a way to avert that strike. They came to nothing in the end. The strike's going ahead initially for 5 days. First of all, guys, what is your thought on this strike? What do you make of it all? It's coming at a point when the strike is not as popular as the last strike was. There seems to be at this stage no meeting of minds between the doctors and the NHS and the health secretary. Really hard to see a way through it. Where's it going?
It's really interesting to me looking at how public opinion on this has changed. It's changed both since this time last year when the junior doctors, now resident doctors, were on strike and they had widespread public support. It's also just dropped since May, so only in the space of a couple of months. And I think the BMA is aware of that. It's also dropped, the support for the strike has actually dropped among BMA members themselves.
Yes.
So I think the turnout was 55%, and then 90% of those who turned out voted in favour. So that's fewer than half of doctors who are members of the BMA voted to support it. And I think if you look at their membership more generally, I think it's about a third of resident doctors in total. I think that's really interesting.
Yes.
That even among the healthcare community,
yes,
there isn't consensus on this. Now, the fact is you cannot force people to be doctors in the NHS if they don't want to be. They can go into private medicine, they can go abroad, and we know that many of them have been, and they can also just drop out of medicine. And we've seen that too. Like if you're a qualified doctor, you can get a job, I don't know, as a consultant on a health tech app, for example, or go into a completely different field altogether. So there is a case of sort of saying retention is a massive problem, recruitment is a problem. We need doctors to work in the NHS. We can't, short of, passing a law that says that anyone who gets certain A levels has to go and be a doctor for the NHS for a certain number of years, which no one is suggesting. But you do have this tension where what the BMA's position on pay and working conditions is and what the position of the public and people in the medical community is, to say nothing of the politicians. There seems to be that disconnect.
Yeah, I mean, after the last pay award for doctors, we've seen after the present government came in, there was a pay award of 22%, and now there's almost it's part of the subtext of what we hear from ministers. Is why are they demanding this, having got 22% last year? Was there some great misunderstanding last year? In that settlement of 22%, did the government or government ministers consider they'd had some sort of pact that they would settle for a period of lower demands now? Because the BMA seemed to be sending the message, look, it was always clear we were going to come back for more and more.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure why Labour was so surprised by that, really. And I do remember during the strikes when the Conservatives were in power and Wes Streeting and Keir Starmer and their colleagues were wagging their fingers and saying all they need to do is get round the table and negotiate, and if we were in power, that's what we would do. We would sort all this out, we'd talk to them, it would all be fine. Clearly that isn't the case. It's so easy from the sidelines, isn't it? And Wes Streeting is clearly finding it's actually quite tough to deal with this radical union. It is a very radical union, we know that. I think, look, the junior doctors, the resident doctors as they are now known, I think they've probably got a very strong case in terms of working conditions. I think there are clearly things that can be done there that should be done. I think there's all kinds of things about job security and training fees, mandatory training within the first few years. That is very expensive when you're fresh out of university, newly qualified and on still a fairly low wage with a big student debt. I think surely there can be some kind of compensation around that, and something to do with where you are appointed, your first job. I think you have no control over what you could be sent anywhere in the country. That's pretty tough. Who wants to be sent to the other end of the country from their family and friends? But when it comes to pay, they have had a stonking great pay rise. They talk about 2008 and how they don't measure up to the pay from 2008. Well, who does? I mean, we had a financial crisis, a global financial crisis. Very few people in the Western world are still on a kind of comparable salary to those times. So I'm not quite sure why they think they are a special case in that way. And then you have to look at the nurses who, let's be honest, keep the show on the road in hospitals, keep the show on the road generally in the health sector, and the nurses will rightly be looking at them and thinking, well, hang on a minute, why are we not entitled to such a bumper pay rise? We at the Express really supported the nurses last time around, because particularly after what they went through in COVID, they deserved a proper whack. And I think this is going to set up a whole chain of things, isn't it? And then you look at, as Rachel was talking about, the 55%, the ballot. Angela Rayner is toughening up the protections for unions, the power of the unions, and actually it's going to be self-defeating for the government, because they really are going to be defeated by their own laws, really, because the way it's going, the support is dropping within the profession. There'll come a point where it will fall below that threshold, the 50% threshold. But under Angela Rayner's laws, they'd still be allowed to bring the NHS to a grinding halt anyway. So I think there's lots of different elements to consider in this. And then also the pensions, they get stonking pensions, 23% contributions from the public sector purse. Nobody in the private sector gets anywhere near that.
I mean, Rachel, nurses watching in the wings. In the background, you've got a big pay rise last year. West Reading has got very limited room to make concessions, even if he wants to. Politically, he has to stand pretty firm.
He has to stand pretty firm on pay, and he's doing so. And I've actually been quite surprised by the strength of the rhetoric coming from Wes Streeting. A couple of weeks ago, I think he said something like the NHS is hanging by a thread and they want to break it, and he said the public will not forgive them for this. And obviously the strikes are still going ahead, but it's very clear whose side of this fight Wes Streeting is on. Where I do think there is room for negotiation and manoeuvre, and Sam brought it up, is on working conditions. On this surreal, bizarre situation where young qualified doctors can be sent to the other end of the country on a couple of weeks' notice, on where staff rotas are done in such a convoluted, bureaucratic way that you will hear, if you've got any friends who are resident doctors, of them not knowing if they'll be able to take off their own wedding day as annual leave, constant gaps in the rota sort of being filled last minute, working different shifts back to back, and it being really difficult to have kind of any kind of life outside of work. And if you are expecting the job to be that all-consuming, which is, for example, what many investment banks expect of their new trainees, you will be chained to your desk, and that is what the job that you have signed up for is. But they're also very well compensated for that. And if you're saying this is what the pay level is, are there things that can be done on working conditions that kind of offer a bit of respect to the fact that these are human beings who are working in our healthcare system? They're not just kind of pawns on a chessboard that big NHS conglomerates can move around and say, oh, we need some doctors up here, 2 weeks, pack your bags, go. With, by the way, I don't think they get any kind of support for moving, or very limited. And I think Wes Streeting's office and Wes Streeting's strategy is to focus on that side of things. And if you have conversations sort of privately with resident doctors, that's the stuff that comes up on a daily basis. So there is room for negotiation. There's just not room for negotiation on pay.
And Wes Streeting has floated ideas that are not lumped into the pay award. Rachel's mentioned some of them. There's the one about taking a lower pension later in exchange for higher pay now. There's forgiveness of student debt. There is a quicker promotion structure. These things have all been battered around, but so far to no particular avail. And maybe in the end, the NHS and health and Wes Streeting are going to have to rely on the fact that, as Rachel says, there's not massive, overwhelming support for this strike. There was 90% of those who voted for it, but nearly half did not. I was speaking just a little earlier on this afternoon to a chief executive of a large foundation trust who was saying, look, he was hoping that over time the doctors would basically come back in. He would see the strike crumble. And we had something of that last time. There's a better chance we'll see more of it this time.
I think it's very difficult if you are a doctor, this is your vocation, it's traditionally been a vocation. I think it's very hard to stand out on the picket line, metaphorical or literal, and watch as people are struggling. I just, for example, if there's a major incident, they just can't.
They do tend to, when you get to it,
Yeah.
I mean, they do tend to go in.
Exactly. But that's the point, isn't it? Ultimately, they are there to save people's lives. And I think many of them find it very difficult to take this kind of action because you don't go into this profession for the money. You could be an investment banker. If money is your only motivation, you would go into investment banking. They're clearly very clever people, and I'm sure they could make that choice. So it is a vocation, and I think it weighs more and more heavily the longer this goes on. And we do know from from coroners around the country that I think it was 5 deaths that were ascribed to the strikes last time round. So I think I just don't think they. Many of them can go on, and the BMA is clearly more radical than most doctors are.
Okay, more coming up on Pienaar and Friends with me, John Pienaar, Sam Lister and Rachel Cunliffe, and you, of course. It's 6:30. Let's get the latest news here on Times Radio with Eliza Phillips.
Videos and interviews.
Pienaar Friends on Times Radio with Barclays Business Banking. Find out how Barclays can help to move your business forward. Search Barclays Business.
And here with me on Pienaar and Friends, Sam Lister from The Express and Rachel Cunliffe from The New Statesman. And Kate has dropped by, who takes over at 7. Hello, Kate.
Hiya, John. We'll take a look at that cabinet reshuffle, or shadow cabinet reshuffle even, what am I saying, for the Conservatives. You wonder whether it is a lever by which Kemi Badenoch can pull, but she's sort of half pulled the lever today. I don't know if anyone's particularly inspired by this. Did she do it because she felt she had to do it? Because she's kind of running out of options to really invigorate her leadership. So an interesting move by her. We'll dig into that. Also some interesting things to come out of the last cabinet meeting before recess this morning. Angela Rayner, the Deputy PM, she spoke in pretty straight-talking terms about avoiding a repeat of the riots that we saw last summer, sparked by, of course, that horrific, the murder of 3 girls in Southport almost 12 months ago. And there's a Downing Street readout of it, and she sort of indicates that there are various conditions which we meet: economic insecurity, the pace of deindustrialisation, immigration, the impacts on local communities, and of course what's happening in Epping at the moment, at a hotel there that houses asylum seekers, one of which has been charged with an assault on a young girl. And it's caused protests since last Thursday in Epping. The Times was there last night, by the way. We will talk about that too. But it just sort of sets a bit of a warning tone for the summer ahead. So we will look into that here on the show and just discuss that in more detail. The local councillor in Epping has described that as a powder keg situation. We know that Tommy Robinson has surfaced, said he'll attend future protests if there are any in Epping. Nigel Farage talked about this yesterday, of course, in his press conference to announce his big plans on law and order. So we'll take a little dive into that this evening. We'll also discuss Ghislaine Maxwell. She will be interviewed by the DOJ. There is a request that's been sent out so that she can speak to the Deputy US Attorney General, Todd Blanche. And the House Oversight Committee have voted to subpoena her over the Epstein files, which means she'll testify in front of Congress. You know, yet again, this is a story that won't go away. Donald Trump seems mildly okay with these actions. I think we'll ask whether they're performative, whether they are by way of demonstrating that justice is seen to be done, or that something is seen to be done in light of all the rumours swirling and the intense thirst for those Epstein files to be fully released. So talk a little about that. Of course, we'll build up to England versus Italy in the semi-finals this evening. And how would you feel, John, if you'd signed up for an AI Elvis experience and there was no hologram of Elvis there? You'd feel a bit let down by that, wouldn't you?
Is this like the sort of Willy Wonka Christmas AI experience thing that turned out to be
Completely
like
rubbish.
3 chocolates and some coloured streamers?
And a strange man in striped trousers. So this is a new Elvis immersive experience in London. People are very upset by it. Tickets range from 75 to 300 quid. No hologram of Elvis. So people attending say they feel conned and missold by it.
Can I ask what there is then? I'm guessing people went along there. I don't know. I haven't been to this ABBA experience.
Oh, it's amazing.
You love it.
It's absolutely incredible. You genuinely do feel like they are in the room with
Yeah,
you.
well, that sounds pretty amazing. I guess people may be hoping for something like that with the King.
So the experience starts off by taking fans on a journey of Elvis's youth. We learn from his childhood friend Sam Bell a little about that. There's an interval in a Hawaii-themed bar with a cardboard cutout of Elvis.
Okay.
Ticket holders find themselves as audience members in the 1968 comeback special concert that was performed live on NBC, apparently. Look, it doesn't get much better than that. A shambles from start to finish, said one reviewer on YouTube. So, AI performances, are they all that after the success of
What was
ABBA?
the AI bit about? I don't want to talk this thing down too far. I'm going to have
AI and
Elvis's learned
holographic
friends after me.
projections of the star.
Projection.
It would include a life-size digital Elvis who'll perform iconic moments.
But he didn't.
But there was no hologram of Elvis. I don't know about the AI. I mean, you'd probably think augmented reality would be better than AI on that.
I honestly don't know.
I don't know, John. I'll look into it for you. I'll
If
do
anyone's
some
been there,
investigating.
send us a text. Give us a review. We'd like to balance things out on this show, whether it's about Elvis, whether it's about pensions, whatever it happens to be about.
The ABBA Voyage one is genuinely sensational. I think even you would enjoy it, John.
Yeah, we say even me as one impossible to please.
You didn't seem
Quite
very
easy to
impressed when you said it a moment
No,
ago.
I haven't seen it. I do know members of my family absolutely loved it. I know
I'm sort of with you on carting John Pienaar off to a warehouse in East London to see ABBA.
To watch a cardboard cut out of Elvis.
No,
I thought we were friends.
no, I'm talking about ABBA now.
Okay.
I can't.
We should organise a field trip, shouldn't we?
I mean, I could. John will tell you lots of better places that he'd prefer to go on a field trip.
Well, if only I had
out.
time. We can talk after the show. Kate, looking forward to your show.
Cheers,
7 o'clock right after this one. Now, look, I gave it the big build-up. The shadow cabinet reshuffle. Kemi Badenoch replanning her team. We got a list in front of us. I'm gonna open it up to you guys, Rachel and Sam. Tell me, why should we be excited about this, Sam?
Oh, well, the exciting bit for me is not the actual front bench movements. They're kind of not people, apart from James Cleverly, they're generally not people that most members of the public will have ever really encountered or paid much attention to. But if you look at the backroom operation, this is where the real significant change is. So Kemi Badenoch and Lee Rowley are parting ways. Now, Lee Rowley was her chief of staff. They have been peas in a pod for years. He was absolutely central to her leadership campaign, to her whole plan for taking over that role, absolutely at the heart of everything. And so it's very interesting to me that he's gone. They go to great pains in this press release to say...
What do you read into the fact that he's gone?
Well, that it's clearly not working. It's clearly not working. I mean, you don't have to be a political expert to know that.
Is it his fault?
Well, I mean, I always think you can't really blame the advisors. It's always down to the leader. They always have the final say. They set the tone for everything. But clearly, if your main man... if your main man is not able to influence you, then you've got a problem, haven't you? You know, if you're not listening to your chief of staff, perhaps, who knows what's gone on, or your chief, there clearly is an issue there if she's getting rid of the chief of staff, because it is a bit like, it would be like Keir Starmer getting rid of Morgan McSweeney. It's a big sign that your direction is not right. Okay. And so she's brought in the second interesting bit, if you're a political geek, is that she's brought in Henry Newman to take over. Now, Henry Newman is a Govite. He was a special advisor to Michael Gove. He also worked on the Vote Leave campaign with Dominic Cummings. He's a man who perhaps is more savvy when it comes to political campaigning, to dealing with the media, to knowing how to pack a punch, shall we say. He clearly was involved in Vote Leave, which was the most successful campaign in history. So he to me is a very wise choice, but obviously all roads lead back to Michael Gove. We know Kemi and Michael Gove are close, and so it's interesting to me that she has brought him in, and I think perhaps they'll become a little bit more savvy.
Okay, so Rachel, I mean, you don't take the view this is so deep inside the Beltway nobody cares. You think it is genuinely interesting and important? Tell me that.
Oh, that's I said I was genuinely interested in it. That's not quite the same thing. So I think Sam's done an excellent job of analysing the backroom personnel changes. So I'll do the front room?
Front of house.
Front of house. And I just want to start with this line that was briefed out this morning by a Tory official on the point of all this, saying that the reshuffle would reflect the next stage of the party's policy renewal programme and underline the unity of the party under new leadership. Now, the renewal part, I think, what the evidence for that is Neil O'Brien, who is sort of the big thinker, I guess, of the Tory party. He's had the shadow education brief, and now has a sort of beefed up role as Shadow Minister for Policy Renewal and Development. The unity part, I think, is bringing back James Cleverly. So now they've got all of the Tory leadership contenders for the last contest other than Tom Tugendhat in the shadow cabinet. And also, like James Cleverly, he's a very good media performer. He's a very good Commons performer. Everyone really likes him. Like he's a sort of his absence has been noted, shall we say, in the top team. But the rest of it, it's kind of, and this is really not to criticise individuals here, but there's a lot of shuffling one person. Oh, we've got a gap there, so we'll move that person sideways. Now we've got a gap there. Or who can fill this in? And Simon Hart, the former Conservative chief whip, talked about reshuffles being a jigsaw puzzle with the pieces missing. And I think you can really see that in this one. It doesn't seem really that bold. If you think of some of the suggestions that were being made in the weeks leading up to it, among them putting Robert Jenrick, Shadow Justice Secretary, making him Shadow Chancellor because he's one of the highest profile members. He's probably one of the few members of the Shadow Cabinet that people outside Westminster have heard of, in part thanks to his video, giving him that brief. That's not there. Injecting some new blood into the whole administration, which you would do by promoting some of the 2024 intake. Now, it was briefed out very heavily beforehand that wasn't what Kemi Badenoch was going to do. And I was speaking to a Conservative MP earlier today that was like, well, you're at 18% in the polls. If now isn't the time to do that, when is? So it's sort of a reshuffle that I think is trying to... Can't really decide if it wants to be we lost someone because the Shadow Health Secretary, Edward Aga, was standing down for health grounds. Okay, fine, we've lost someone, we need to replace him and sort that all out. Or is it the big, bold renewal reshuffle? And it's sort of trying to be both and not really doing neither.
Right. So Sam, they're heading off for their summer break. Next time we see them all together is going to be at the Conservative Party conference and in Manchester. Is the story there, maybe even the only story, going to be Kemi Badenoch and can she survive?
Almost certainly. I mean, you put a load of hacks in a room with a party that's in trouble and they're going to be looking for splits everywhere. Even when a party is singing from the same hymn sheet, everyone's always looking, aren't they, clearly? Now, Robert Jenrick, I get the whole, should she have moved Robert Jenrick into the role of Chancellor, Shadow Chancellor or something like that. But actually, he has been such an effective performer that if you moved him into a dry role like that, I think...
Clip his wings a bit.
It would have clipped his wings. It would have been perhaps sensible to clip the wings of your rival. But also, if you are struggling in the polls and you've only got two effective performers on that front bench, then do you really want to move one of them into a position where, for your own selfish reasons, it might be a good thing, but for the good of the wider party, you're really going to struggle.
There's also the possibility that a demotion and the humiliation that goes with it would have prompted Robert Jenrick to speed up the plan, given that the plan is to replace Kemi Badenoch, and to have him outside the tent and not inside it might have meant that the poison darts come in even that much more quickly.
I think I was just going to say the point of danger for Kemi Badenoch, although there'll be lots of chatter about it at party conference, it will be after the local elections next year and the Welsh elections.
It's one that's going to take that long.
I think they will wait until they see what happens in Wales.
So I think the plan is for them to wait to see what happens in Wales. That certainly is what makes sense on paper. But just to go back to what you said a moment ago, Sam, you get a whole load of journalists in a room with, not in a room, in a conference centre over a number of days with MPs who are frustrated, despairing, exhausted, constantly feeling like they have been looked over for XYZ, because that's what conference is. Everyone always feels that they've been looked over for something, and also drunk, because there's a lot of alcohol at these things. My top tip for journalists going to conferences: don't drink. It makes your life much more easy if you're the sober one and everyone else is. And that is the kind of, we hate this word, febrile atmosphere, but that is the kind of atmosphere where suddenly decisions get taken very quickly, which aren't necessarily what the people making them intended, but then they spiral.
Lesson of Evelyn Moore's Scoop. If you send a lot of journalists out to some obscure Central African country, which is thoroughly peaceful, and send them out to cover a civil war, there'll be a civil war because they need to find a story, and they'll be sending back that story, and soon there it goes, it all kicks off. And that's what happens at party conferences.
Absolutely. But I wonder if this actually, last year at Conservative Party conference, we expected it to be almost like a wake and very kind of maudlin. It wasn't.
It was happy. It was cheerful.
It was very strangely.
Weird. It was so weird.
Everyone was very excited, but I think it's because they had this contest to look forward to and everyone was jostling for position. And I think this year will be the year where actually will any MPs really even bother to turn up? But it will only be people who have to get up on the stage and give a speech. And I suspect they'll all head back to London as soon as they've done it. I suspect that it's actually going to be a very low-key conference, not huge amounts of
and quite a few journalists gathering around the 4 MPs who are there,
exactly,
and asking them about the plot.
Yes, exactly that, John.
Okay, more coming up. Pienaar and Friends on Times Radio with Barclays Business Banking. Find out how Barclays can help move your business forward. Search Barclays Business.
Get ahead of the news with Kate Borsay from 7. $1.99 Big Mac.
The Big Mac of Destination Mission.
And a chop.
And Rachel Cunliffe here with me on Pienaar and Friends. I want to talk about tech and why maybe we should be worried, and this of course we shouldn't, but I think there maybe is good reason to be concerned. We saw the story today in the Times, really catches your eye. A glimpse of a dystopian possible future. The Russian regime, Vladimir Putin, is arranging things so that every Russian mobile will come equipped with a helpful app. It is called Max, and this app will do the useful function from the point of view of the secret police and Vladimir Putin of feeding back to whichever secret policeman happens to be interested the user's whereabouts, the user's phone calls, the user's messages, video calls, whatever the user may be browsing on the internet at a particular moment. Just about everything about that person in real time, the entire time, according to this app, which is plugged in to the GRU or whatever Secret Service happens to be taking an interest. I mean, as an idea there, as I say, it's a glimpse of a dark possible future. It is a scary one, isn't it?
Absolutely terrifying. I mean, as you say, John, it monitors every aspect of your life. Everything you look at, everybody you speak to, everything you... I mean, we know phones, essentially, we all live on our phones, our lives are in our phones. And I think the prospect is utterly terrifying. If you want to stamp out opposition to your regime, then if you keep people in fear, it's the best way to do it. I think there's, I think it's quite a. I think in Russia, a lot of people are on virtual private networks, and what's not clear from this is will that still allow them to bypass this? I suspect.
I think they're trying to make it hard as possible.
Yeah.
So WhatsApp was still around. They did. I mean, Putin didn't move against those immediately. He started off by limiting use of WhatsApp, by slowing down the way that the app works. And now these things are going to be banned.
Yeah.
To give the Max app, the licensed Max app, a very, very tight hold on the market.
Well, I think the thing is that even if it were still possible to use a VPN, the Max app would be able to report that you were using a VPN, which suddenly makes you look suspicious. It says it's Russia's equivalent of China's WeChat app, which Beijing uses for online surveillance and censorship. So this is not the first time that we've seen something like this. And what's really sinister to me is to see that initiative that has actually been really quite successful in China, with success measured by what the Beijing government would like it to do, spreading out into other countries. There's also a quote that I wasn't aware that in 2014 Vladimir Putin said that the internet is a CIA project. So this is clearly something that he has been on his mind for some time, that if you want to cement your power, stamp out dissent, be the leader of a really authoritarian regime for many, many decades, then the internet is a barrier to doing that. It's also a massive tool, by the way, and we know that the Kremlin has used misinformation and bots and Russian spam farms to really cause havoc on the internet for other nations. So it's probably got a good idea of the damage that the internet can do, because they've been doing it to the rest of us. But it's really terrifying, and the thing that kind of stands out is thinking, as Sam said, like thinking, what does life look like, modern life look like, without your phone? How would you go back to, I don't know, would you go back to fax machines? Would you go back to post? Would you go back to carrier pigeon?
Would we start talking to each other again, or something radical like that?
But then the lines are bugged, so do you have to meet in person? And just trying to sort of unpick all of the ways in which this technology is so embedded in our lives. When you start to think about it, it becomes just too big, too vast to contemplate very, very quickly.
Right, now, China is China, Russia is Russia. We're neither of those authoritarian countries, obviously, are we? But what do you make about the move that is going on now on the part of the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, but the government, to take power to plug into encrypted communications? Apple has been the target of all of this, and the government wants to take power to go to court and get an order so it can plug into encrypted communications in search of material and evidence which can be used to hunt down the likes of terrorists or child abusers and the like. Now, the tech companies are fighting this. Now, the US government is siding with the big tech companies. It looks like a pretty broad power. What do you think? Are you reassured by the government seeking these tools to attack, difficult targets like terrorists, or are you worried about what it means for privacy?
This question is one of the many reasons that I would not be an MP and go into government, because I think the tension between those two things, between freedom and security, and there's not no particular government, but a lot of sort of, when things have gone wrong, whether it's to do with a conspiracy or whether it's to do with incompetence, and we had the Afghan data leak revelations just last week, is to go, even if ministers are working with everyone's best interests at heart, I feel very uneasy about handing over the right to just view everyone's private communications to, maybe these ministers are great, maybe these ministers are very competent. Can we be certain that all of the future governments will be? But I also just very much understand if your job is to prevent a terrorist attack, you want all the tools at your disposal, and the people who are planning terrorist attacks have these tools, and it's a bit of an information arms race. So that's a job for people who sign up to make those decisions, not me.
Okay, what do you think, sir?
I hate sitting on the fence, but I do agree with Rachel on this.
Come join me on the fence. It's comfortable here.
My instinct is always to protect people's privacy, and I do feel there is always this, well, if you're not doing anything wrong, what have you got to hide? And I really loathe that, because you should have the right to not have your things snooped on by the government. And I get that it's for very specific circumstances. I've no kind of paranoia that the government wants to snoop on my shopping list or whatever it is, but I just think it is a slippery slope, and we've seen what has happened in Russia and China, and clearly we are not a similar nation in terms of our makeup psychologically and historically, but who knows where it ends. And also, again, I don't trust the government with my data. There's so many examples, even in the last 20 years, of government mishaps with data that do we really want to be handing over this stuff to them? I'm not sure we do. But I do think, actually, Rachel made that interesting point about going back to fax machines. What this made me think of was kind of Cold War spy tactics. Do you have to go back to kind of chalk marks on pavements and handwritten letters on glass to stop people finding out what if you are part of some form of, it sounds silly, but if you're part of some form of resistance in Russia, then what are your tactics now? How do you go about organising? You've got very limited options, and I don't quite know what you do, but you are going to have to go back to tactics.
Well, the great complication for the British government now is the American administration. Because, as I say, the administration in Washington is very anti-Britain taking this power. They're siding with the American big tech companies. And, well, we've got J.D. Vance, who's described this as an entirely unjustified invasion of privacy. Donald Trump has compared it to Chinese authoritarianism. And it seems that the White House is using this as a counter in the conversation about tech and trade. The trade talks, even to the point that the trade talks could be derailed by a disagreement about this. And on top of that, it is now suggested that Keir Starmer may be on the point of backing away from this particular instrument under pressure from Donald Trump. So maybe two issues there. One is the rightness of the thing on principle on its own. Then you've got the question of backing away if the government, decides that it is right in principle, not because it's changed its mind or it's been argued round, but because Donald Trump makes them do it.
Well, I mean, we've seen Keir Starmer literally on his knees in front of Donald Trump, so I can't say I'm surprised.
That's unfair.
I'm being mean.
Was he meant to not pick up the pieces of paper?
Metaphorically on his knees.
There we go. It was a good line.
Right. Well, to be Prime Minister is to have dilemmas. Got to leave it there. Rachel Cunliffe and Sam Lister. Thank you, as always, for being with us. Ollie Cole was our producer, and the technical operator was Isaac Marley. I'm going to be back tomorrow, same time, same channel, and Kate Boss is up next on Times Radio.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio, the voice of the Times.
It is 7 o'clock. This is the evening edition with Kate Borsay. Coming up.
Industrial action that happens in the NHS, it's always the patients who pay the price. And there's no getting away from that.
So the 5-day doctor strike will start in England on Friday. That was Nick Hume, Chief Executive of an NHS Foundation Trust. We'll get more reaction to that news for you this evening. We'll evaluate Kemi Badenoch's first shadow cabinet reshuffle.